My deep appreciation of theater history was instilled in me by Tom Empey, a college mentor to me and hundreds of others. While teaching Greek theater terms, he would grab the fabric of his slacks and say, "You see these pants? Euripides Eumenides," making light of content that could be considered rather dry and stuffy while still maintaining respect for the art, which is what I want to do with this podcast. For each episode, I invite a guest from the many paths my theater career has taken me down. I give my guest no idea what we'll be talking about, but they know we're going to find an outrageous story about theater history and perhaps get a better understanding about why we're still doing it after all these years. So welcome to Euripides Eumenides, and I am your host, Aaron Odom.
Apocalypse, apocalypse, I said, why you wanna show up now? Just when the heart of my life was getting good. I'll give you one more chance. Walk on out of the door, yeah. Get your ass to getting where the getting is good.
Good morrow, Eumenidites. This is Aaron Odom from Trident Theater bringing you another episode of Euripides Eumenides, a theater history podcast. What a milestone! 75 episodes, and here we are. And as of this past weekend, I have been recording episodes for over 3 years now. Tempus fugit, am I right? But, speaking of time, I want to get right to the episode today as we got a lot of ground to cover. But before I begin, I do have to say that the first part of this episode, once we get to the topic at hand, gets a little down. But I have often said on this show that theater is written about the most influential moments of the lives of the characters in it. And sometimes those circumstances aren't so shiny. So stick with it. I promise it will be worth your time. As a guest, I have my friend Robert Bogue returning to the show. Robert was last on the show for episodes 43 and 44, Inevitable or Inevitable, about Patti LuPone's creation of the role of Eva Peron on Broadway. Robert is a Seattle-based theater artist, so when I found out about this story that we're going to talk about today, and that it ultimately takes place in Seattle, I knew he'd be just the person to have back. But, as I said before, plays are written about the most significant moments in the lives of the characters, and today's topic covers some hot-button issues of recent years and of years past. So, without further ado, here is today's episode, The Seattle Federal Theater Project and Spirochete. Robert, here you are again.
I am here again, and there are you. There again.
There
yes.
we is. I zoomed, therefore I is. So last time we talked, you were getting ready to do a Rocky Horror Picture Show, and it sounds like that was a huge success for you.
Rocky Horror Show. I love. This is I think the third time I've directed that show, and it's always popular. I think that. This round, there were some new sensitivities that we were able to address, and I think we addressed them very well with the community. And that's actually something that'll lead into what I want to talk about during your show today about all the
great
topic and everything. But it was the most popular show that the Red Curtain Foundation I think has ever done. Wow. It was completely sold out every performance, which they've never had happen before. Got great reviews. And the biggest thing is the audiences and the cast really enjoyed it, and it brought people together in a whole bunch of new ways in a little town, that little town of Marysville, Washington.
Yeah,
really. Has a lot of I guess changes they need to go through, and I think this really helped it, and I mean that in a positive way.
Exactly. Yes.
So yeah.
Man.
So excited. Yeah.
And we just did ours here. We just do the one performance a year, the Shadowcast production. But Robert, every year there is a big surprise that happens. Okay. I usually work with folks who are not 100% trained actors. They're people who are like, I kind of want to explore myself. I want to see what's going on. And my first year, my riffraff practically did I think he had some clothes on by the time he was done, but ended up in his time warp ripping off jacket, vest, shirt, throwing them to the crowd. They all loved it. Last year, my Eddie was played by a woman, and my Columbia was a woman. And at the end of Hot Patootie, this wasn't something we practiced. They just planted a big fat wet kiss on each other, and the crowd went nuts. Okay,
nice.
Here's my surprise this year, Robert. Okay, fans of Rocky Horror, you'll know what I'm talking about here. You know, you invite the audience to bring their props, bring their their water guns and their newspapers, and where we perform, they say if you're gonna do that stuff, please bring no foodstuffs. We don't want to find a moldy piece of bread under the stage 3 weeks later, stuff like that. So people are generally pretty respectful. You know what they did this year, Robert? The big surprise was that nobody in the crowd threw anything. They were so excited about holding their phone and screaming the callbacks because they're reading them off of a script.
Reading the callbacks.
Yeah, and they're just yelling. I mean, it was so freaking loud. A couple people were like, I have no idea what went on with the movie because I've never seen it before, but everybody seemed to have a good time. I remember looking at some kids who brought toilet paper to throw, and they just didn't know when. The poor things, they had like this unraveled roll of toilet paper, this mound of toilet paper in their hands, and they're just kind of looking around like, what do we do? And I'm like, throw it. It doesn't matter. Just throw it. Do something. They didn't do it. That was my big surprise. Anyway.
Oh, I know how that is, because I mean, we do ours is the live stage, the stage musical. So it's the Rocky Horror Show. So it has a lot of different callbacks than in the movie version,
right?
Or than a shadow cast. And so with that, audiences kind of need some coaching or some encouragement, because they're like, wait a second, the actors can hear me. I've been told my whole life that I shouldn't scream at actors on stage. So they sometimes need some encouragement. So sometimes, at least to get them going, in the pre-show speech, and then, and maybe somebody, bald and dressed in oddly colored and everything clothes in the back might be yelling things through the whole show trying to get people to go.
I can't imagine that person doesn't look like you at all, but
no. Well, at the time looked nothing like me, of course, but well, nothing like this right now, I'll tell you that right now. But it's that's awesome. It's a great show. So
really that red curtain, you're getting ready to do another one, and this is another show that I've directed, but I'm very excited to hear your spin on it.
Yeah, Red Curtain Foundation. This year, this season, they're doing something really unique and really brave, especially for a small theater like that. They're actually doing an entire season inspired by Shakespeare.
Love it.
Every single show is either a Shakespeare show or a show that's influenced by Shakespeare. So they did something Rotten earlier in the season. They did. They're doing a version of R&J. They did a show just recently that was fairly well received. It was an all-female adaptation of Lear, which was really cool.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was very, very bold. And then I am lucky enough to be doing all of Shakespeare's shows,
all of them,
in one show, and that's the complete works of William Shakespeare abridged again. Yes. Because this is I'm super excited about this. This is a brand new version, a abridged version.
Oh yeah,
it was just released less than a year ago.
Oh, that's awesome.
It's got some changes. It's got again some sensitivities updated, which but it still keeps the most amazing spirit of this show and of Shakespeare.
Right.
But I'm very excited to be to be directing this relatively brand new version of it. So
that's so cool.
I'm excited. So,
and I love how that group, the Reduced Shakespeare Company, keeps their stuff active and live, and they go, okay, so we at the time we were doing this, this may have been insensitive, and we weren't really aware. So it's cool that they're kind of like, hey, we take it back. We're gonna try again, guys, and try to make this better and try to make this work better. So that's really cool. And
yeah, it is cool. Yeah, it's very cool. I think they've got I think this is like the sixth or seventh version now. I don't know which one.
Yeah.
So
let's see. I did it in 2018. It was Complete Works of William Shakespeare, abridged, revised.
Yeah, this one. Yeah. So it's exciting. It's exciting. They always exciting to do Shakespeare. Always challenging too. So,
yeah. And speaking of challenging, that is a wonderful segue into the topic we are going to be discussing today.
Okay.
Now, I didn't tell you, but I do like to give my guests something of a hint. And earlier this week, I sent you kind of the hint to kind of mull over and everything. But Robert, are you ready for this?
Let's do it.
All right.
Okay.
So, Robert, I want you to give me an example of effective political theater.
Okay. I can do that.
All right.
And the funny thing is it's going to segue right back into what we were talking about. So
I know. Perfect.
So for me, I think that the political theater is multi-level. You've got, I think, the very on the nose kind of definition of political theater, where it's very straightforward. You've got like shows like Frost Nixon, which talks about the interview that the David Frost had with Richard Nixon regarding the Watergate scandal. There's shows like that. Then there's shows that I think take a really great kind of twist, and they'll either kind of use political motivations and political themes as the main story, but they're not kind of throwing it out there. This is a debate. This is we're in the White House, we're in the palace kind of thing. So like things like shows like You're in Town. You're in Town, I think is a really great one. And if nobody's seen that, that's just really quickly, that's about satirizes capitalism and social irresponsibility and municipal politics and things like that, by showing this community where this one large corporation is trying to control water output and water usage by making everyone pay to use the restroom facilities.
Pay to pee.
And pay to pee. Exactly. I know. I was like being really clinical about that. You're like, yeah, they pay to pee.
No.
Don't even go there, Robert. We don't have time for this on this type of podcast. But it's a musical. And it's a comedy, but it has some really serious moments. Oh, and then of course, there's, I'll just say obviously Hamilton. Hamilton jumps out there is obviously very effective on so many levels. And obviously super popular. But honestly, I'm gonna go again, and this is no way to plug my show, but I'm gonna drop back, and I'm gonna say that for me the most effective is we gotta go back to the classics. We gotta go back to Shakespeare, and for me it's Richard III. Honestly. Oh man, honestly, yes. I'm not just talking about the actual play as written and everything like that. I'm actually even talking about, it's a show that I've seen adapted so many times, and every single time it's this really fantastic highlight of the political facets of the family of the right. It's just amazing. And I'm thinking, if there's not a production of around that you haven't seen for a while, you can definitely check out the Ian McKellen. Oh, it's just fantastic.
Yeah. Kind of set against kind of almost like a Nazi regime situation. I mean, they're really throwing that kind of
very fascist background. Yeah, and they really find that focus. Right. I think that, that's more of an obvious one. I think that right. Even in the original version, this Shakespeare scripted version,
Mm-hmm.
it's pretty straightforward. The
Yeah.
politics of how do you manipulate the system to gain your own political advantage and your this power struggle within this family, which is, I think, is what all the politics is about.
Well, even if you watch like the Olivier version, it's very Prince Valiant.
Mhm.
I mean, it looks like it's taken directly out of a comic strip. And here's this man who just has a little bit of a funny back, and he walks a little funny, and therefore everybody thinks they just underestimate him so much based on just a couple little traits. And he's able to use that to such advantage.
Yeah.
And when we talk political theater, I think that's interesting that you came up with Richard III, because when you talk about classic plays, you talk about plays that stand the test of time. And if Richard III wasn't still relevant, then it wouldn't be a classic play.
Agreed.
So, hey, people, we have to figure out that our sensibilities can be easily manipulated. There we go. I've said it. Okay.
Well, and talking about and talking about that too, I think shows like this work on a whole different level too, and that the show itself is great. It's great about this manipulating the power, but then I think a vital part of political theater and politics in general, I guess, is that when Shakespeare wrote this, he was writing this as a, his patron was Elizabeth. I mean, he's writing for so you would not want to write something that showed your patron in a bad light.
Correct.
So, there's a lot of talk about how so much of Richard's actions are so blown out of proportion. His physicality and all of this, it's done to, again, manipulate the perception that people have. And that is so much about what politics is. My opinion of any politician, right or left, I don't care who it is you really have to question anyone that spends that much money and that much time to take a job that will affect your life, your family's life, and do all of the bad stuff, and not just the good stuff. And you have to question people's motivation for getting into politics. Why is it they're really doing this? Is it nobody, right or left, does it just because they think it's a great idea and they're just we're just gonna help out. I'm sorry.
I've only ever wanted to help. I've only ever wanted to serve.
I'm completely selfless. Yeah, and I think a lot of people are. I'm not trying to rail on people. That there's a lot of people that believe in their hearts that what they're doing is right, and that's on the right and left. And right, left, center, anybody, but have that much power. You got to really consider, really think about what it is you're doing it for, and who you're giving that kind of power to. So
Woo. Yeah.
Gee, this isn't a touchy subject at all today.
Oh, no.
I got the easy one.
Oh, wait, you want touchy subjects? Okay, here we go. Robert, I'm going to tell you a little story.
Okay.
In 1997, I got my first experience with a play that focused specifically on issues affecting the LGBTQ plus community. Mm-hmm. I saw a touring production of Rent in Minneapolis, and it blew my mind. Mm-hmm. I mean, for weeks afterwards, I was constantly listening to the soundtrack, trying to figure out which character was my voice and my personality, my looks. Like, which one am I? Can I play any of these? Right? I even got a T-shirt from the merch table, wore it with pride, because I had seen an important play about an important topic. And it made me feel quite enlightened, probably because of how the play addressed AIDS with such candor and how the illness affected that small community. I was now part of that discussion. But that discussion was not too easily brought about in this country, was it?
No, not at all.
Okay.
Not at all.
Here we go. Tough topics. In 1981, the New York Times reported on a rare cancer that was only affecting homosexual men. After that, the illness didn't get a lot of attention from media, the government, medical science, etc.
Mhm.
And I don't want to get too extremely political here, but some things I read suggested that reporters like specifically stayed away from it. They didn't want to damage their careers or anything, even though they knew
Mhm.
it was happening.
Yeah.
If actors were homosexual and nominated for an award which demanded them to make an appearance on an award show, they were reminded not to bring their same-sex partners.
Yeah.
Because of the camera panned over and saw you
Because the
holding
camera
hands.
pan, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
In fact, I heard about one who did. I can't remember who was on the Tonys. And in his acceptance speech, he thanked his lover, who was sitting in the front row with him.
Mhm.
And after that, blacklisted. No more work for that guy.
Yeah. It's terrible. I mean,
Right?
it's terrible. And all the progress we've made, we still the progress that even the theater community
Yeah.
has made. You still have a long way to go. And I say that as a cisgender male. I do not understand. I will never be able to completely understand a lot of the struggle that marginalized communities go through. I won't.
Right. No.
I can support. I can do what I can to make sure that these communities are always supported and always listened to. But I will never be able to understand. I'm not going to pretend to understand.
No.
But the only way to the only real way to, I think one of the only real ways to do that, to support these communities, is to use the vehicle of our art and use the vehicle of theater and music and film to shine a light. And it doesn't always have to be an accusatory light. Sometimes you get a lot more flies with honey.
Right.
So being true and honest to their stories, being true and honest to the characters, and being sensitive to where they are, where they were, and where they want to be, I think is super, super important.
Oh, yeah. But see, we are now at least at a point where we can talk about it.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
I agree. Yeah.
In the 80s, going back to this, there seemed to just be a stigma about the illness that despite people dying in large numbers, people just didn't want to talk about it. Yeah. And plenty of arts critics have suggested that more wasn't said in the early stages because to talk about AIDS, you have to talk about gay sex.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not really something that's just common dinner table talk in the early 80s, I suppose. So.
Oh, absolutely not. Yeah. Yeah. We don't do that. Because if you talk about it, it's real. And
it's real. Yeah.
That.
Yeah.
No.
It wasn't until 1985 when film star Rock Hudson died of AIDS that people then started to wonder. I mean, Rock Hudson was this handsome, rugged, romantic leading man, right? He was a friend of President Reagan. He couldn't be gay, right? Turns out he could.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I guess the same thing happened with Liberace, where people were like, huh? He's gay? And you're like, yeah.
And it's not just the LGBTQ plus community. It's just listening to a story on NPR about another play that I have loved, and a storybook that I've loved forever is Peter Pan.
Oh yeah.
And Peter Pan is I've done it once. I've been in it once, and I've read the story to the kid, the Disney version to the kids. I've read the original version to the kids, which is a little more graphic.
Yeah.
It's got many problems when you examine it. It's got many problems as far as the roles of women, obviously the roles of the Native Americans. Oh yeah. And there is a really listening to just NPR recently. There's a new version. It's just coming out. It's going to be a new touring production. Huh. They engaged, and I want to say, because I wrote this down because I want to make sure. Larissa Fasthorse. She's a Native American author, playwright, and they engaged her to write the new adaptation. And she talked about it, and it's not just that she's trying to address the racial insensitivity. She really needed to address how women are treated throughout the play.
Right.
but then an amazing idea of how to deal with the quote unquote tribe that's always attacking and killing the and she expanded the people, the individuals in Wonderland by not just making them all from a quote unquote Indian tribe, but they are all from marginalized communities and communities that are and they are just, and the idea is that they are just in Neverland waiting for their chance to return. So I thought it was a cool idea. I'm so excited to see it, but it's just another great, and it's just another great example of the politics of race and the politics of religion, the politics of how things evolve and how they change, and it's not always completely obvious. It's not always but it's things that we have to consider, and things that it's about time we considered them.
Right. Right. Yeah. Well, let me jump back here to 1985 and Rock Hudson dying. Incidentally, it wasn't until Hudson died in 1985, after a presidential election, of course, that President Reagan finally publicly decried AIDS as a health emergency and demanded funding and research. And up until then, those afflicted with AIDS mainly just suffered and died.
Yeah.
Now, given all this silence in popular media, theater artists seem to be some of the first to make some noise about AIDS. And we can list a whole canon of AIDS plays here, but if we're really going to talk about the ones that open people's eyes, we have to talk about Larry Kramer's The Normal Heart and Tony Kushner's Angels in America.
Angels in America, yeah.
Yep. Now, I'll briefly summarize each because we have a lot more to cover today. Now, before he was recognized as a playwright, Larry Kramer was known for being an ardent gay rights activist, to the point that a lot of gay people actually avoided anything Larry Kramer, since his tactics were pretty revolutionary. And by revolutionary, I don't mean like wildly innovative. I mean like burn the system to the ground revolutionary.
Yeah.
But his play, The Normal Heart, actually began to turn the conversation in a new direction. And here's a clipping from an article that I found. It's a little bit longer, but I think it summarizes the play's cultural impact quite succinctly. In The Normal Heart, which opened off-Broadway in April 1985, playwright and activist Larry Kramer dramatized his own struggle to force politicians, doctors, and the gay community to confront a disease many were treating with skepticism or indifference. In front of a set on which the rising fatalities and the names of the dead were scrawled and updated with each performance, Kramer's crusading onstage alter ego Ned Weeks ranted, raged, and fell desperately in love. He was played by Brad Davis, the star of Midnight Express and Carell, who died of AIDS 6 years later. That bit about the names on the set, like, you're going, yeah, but isn't this just like affecting a few people? You go, no, here. The numbers are right here behind me.
Yeah. Back at that same time, I remember the AIDS quilt.
Yeah, the AIDS quilt.
Touring the country. And I actually remember it was about that same time that when I first got into college, and I was going to Southern Utah University, and Utah Shakespeare Festival had just done a production of Waiting for Godot the summer before. And one of the actors, I believe his name is Larry Lott, was in that show, and he passed away, AIDS-related illness, right after that summer.
Wow.
He started to get sick very fast. And I remember not long after that, the AIDS sections, they divvied out like sections of the AIDS quilt.
Yeah.
One of them, I believe, came to Salt Lake, and seeing one of the panels with Larry's.
Oh, wow.
Panel it's an emotional experience.
Yeah.
And I didn't know him. I didn't know him beyond having walked his path on stage, being at the same theater, but I didn't know that much about him. I mean, I knew what a talented actor he was.
But now it's in your sphere.
Yeah.
Now it was there. So it couldn't be
Yeah.
unreal anymore. And
Yeah.
that's one of the problems, I think, with a lot of political issues. Like, if it's not affecting you right away, then what's the problem?
Exactly. Exactly.
Well, it's affecting humanity, and you are part of humanity. So here's another great quote about normal heart I found. The normal heart felt like a dispatch from the front lines of a war. Angels in America had a similar effect. It was first performed in 1991, but was set just a few years prior in the mid-1980s. By this time, AIDS had become more of a household term, with media figureheads like teenage Ryan White appearing daily on the news until his death in 1990 at age 18. White had hemophilia and had contracted the AIDS virus, or the HIV virus, in 1984 from a blood transfusion, which proved that it now could be transmitted through different methods than what had been kept out of the papers just a few years before. White received public support from multiple celebrities, including Michael Jackson. Mm-hmm. And that Ryan White Foundation is still out there and still helping people get all kinds of discounted or free AIDS treatment, which I think is really cool.
That's fantastic. Yeah.
But anyway, back to Angels in America. The play is split into 2 parts, and it spans a total of 7 hours. The story is told in several intertwining plot lines, including a young newlywed Mormon man who is unsure of his sexuality, a gay man who is left by his lover when he reveals his AIDS diagnosis, and a real-life politician who shook the moral majority from within when his AIDS diagnosis became more and more evident. And if I need to speak to the play's impact, besides going to Broadway and winning a ton of awards, by the time I had gotten to college in the late 90s, it was one of the required plays to know and read in the course of theater history. Mm-hmm. So I won't say that it was just theater that gave the AIDS crisis the focus it deserved, but it did turn a lot of heads. Mm-hmm. After 1985, the conversation was happening. There may have been a lot of misinformation at the time, but it wasn't all misinformation. And frankly, the conversation was happening.
Yeah.
So, which was great. You know, I mean, you still have people going, well, can't I get it from being in a hotel hot tub? No.
Yeah. No, but there's, we have so much misinformation now.
I know.
I mean, no, I agree. I think that you were absolutely right. And I think the conversation needed to happen a lot sooner.
Oh, yeah. So, Robert.
Yeah.
Now that we've sunk this show to the bottom of the Pacific with good feelings, would you like to know about another time when theater may have changed some opinions about a health epidemic in America?
What, you mean it happened more than once?
More than once?
Wait, no, I can't. What?
Okay. So, the prevailing theory on this other epidemic is that when Columbus returned from the New World, some of the sailors on the voyage enjoyed some carnal relations with people they met in the New World. In 1495, the first official outbreak of syphilis was recorded in multiple locations across Europe, even though evidence of the disease existed on remains discovered from ancient Greek and Roman times.
But it's the sailors.
It's the sailors.
It's those sailors.
The dirty sailors coming from the New World.
From the New World.
Where all those indigenous women were doing the...
Oh, my God.
Yep. Okay. And since no one really knew the origins of the disease other than Columbus's voyage, and since political tensions were quite apparent at the time, the illness was known by several names. Originally derived from a Latin poem, it became known as the French disease in Italy, Malta, Poland, and Germany. The French thus called it the Italian disease. The Dutch called it the Spanish disease. The Russians called it the Polish disease. And probably my favorite of all, in Turkey, syphilis was known as the Christian disease.
Wow. I see, my brain is immediately wanting to say things that I'm like, no, we should not say this. I am not going to marginalize anybody else after everything I just said. I'm like, I have opinions.
Now, there were probably a lot of reasons for all this finger pointing. I mean, I think the Dutch and the Spanish, there was something about Habsburg rule and Catholicism and blah, 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 whatever.
Yeah.
So that's why they pointed fingers there. But as I mentioned before, most countries in Europe and Western Asia were feeling fiercely nationalist and liked to spread ill favor on their perceived enemies. But also, the symptoms of syphilis included the following, and this is probably like, it was so obvious when people had it, so it was terrible, and they could point fingers at that. Here we go. Here's the symptoms of syphilis. Sores and lesions on the genitals, but as the disease progresses, the sores appear on different parts of the body. Lumps that grow under the skin and can affect the appearance of the face. Like I saw a bust of somebody that, like, it was kind of Quasimodo in a way, like this large lump between the eyes, and the eyes had started to, one was higher than the other on each side of the face. It was very weird. And the nose and ears are liable to fall off, as well as the genitals.
That's not a good look.
Yeah.
That's not a good look.
It even became so prevalent that people would sell fake noses. Like, you could see a guy with a platinum nose or something like that, an iron nose, and you're like, you got the SIF. Okay, cool. Yeah. Now, since most people had at least a general understanding that syphilis transmitted through sexual encounter, those affected by it were considered sinful to the highest degree, regardless of how each victim contracted the disease. It can be passed on congenitally through birth. So a person can have it and not have done
anything. Yeah.
But then people are still like, heathen.
Oh, absolutely.
Plus, because it was known to be transmitted sexually, it was not appropriate to speak about publicly.
Yeah.
Here we go again.
Yeah, we go again.
This was the norm all through the formation of the United States. Nobody talked about it. Even up to the 1930s, when syphilis was still affecting a large portion of the population, and while an early treatment had been created, it was not promoted, as it was inappropriate to discuss.
Oh yeah, and we've come so far. We didn't do the administration that was in the office when the whole COVID started. Yeah, they didn't blame that on any specific region of the country or race or anything. Oh no,
specific type of cuisine.
And we didn't. Yeah, we didn't totally deny it actually happened. No, we've come. We are an enlightened civilization now.
Aren't we, though? Yeah. So here we find ourselves in the 1930s, in the throes of the Great Depression. Theater at this point had a pretty clear dividing line in America. You have commercial theater and you have non-commercial theater. Commercial theater tended to be more appealing to the masses and didn't really like to rock the boat socially, especially when socialist movements had been happening all over the world in the prior few decades. We don't want to, don't dabble in that.
Yeah, no.
Non-commercial theaters, on the other hand, were totally fine with challenging societal norms and introducing new ideas. Companies like the Provincetown Players and the Group Theater set the standards for not only what types of plays should be seen, but also the methods of acting that, air quotes, should be used. And as you may recall, the Group Theater dissolved partially because of a disagreement between Lee Strasberg and Stella Adler on how the Stanislavski method should be applied.
Yeah.
They were serious about their craft.
Yeah. Yes.
But this was also the time that little theaters were popping up all over the country, similar to the ones discussed in Chicago in my episode Bernadine and Lady Precious stream. These were places where struggling actors and playwrights could have their new works about new ideas heard. And if they got enough clamor, they could be picked up by a commercial theater, very similar to how plays sometimes will get to Broadway or the West End today. In addition to all of this, commercial theater seemed to cater only to a certain crowd, that which could afford it. Gee, nothing like today, huh?
No, nothing like today. Nothing like today. That actually does bring about something that I've always had a problem with Hamilton.
Oh yeah, we mentioned that on the last show.
Which I now admit I really love Hamilton. I really do. I understand what everybody's saying is about Hamilton. I, however, do not think that I was wrong in any of my criticisms, especially in the whole idea that it makes theater accessible. I think one of the big important things to make theater accessible is to provide an outlet so that people can actually go and see it, so they can experience it live. Not just it's great to be able to pop on Disney Plus and watch it. But there is much more of an experience of being able to go and sit in a darkened theater and experience that energy live, and to even do it more than once. And even for me, real good theater tickets or even bad theater tickets are just not possible. I mean, even in a town like Seattle, it's just not doable for people's budgets that they really want to do it. So we enjoy what we can through downloads and videos and things like that, but it's not the same. And that's also something that I think is actors have to be paid. Artists must make that money.
It's so difficult.
But there's a balance. There's a balance.
I'm finally going to, I haven't bought the tickets yet, but I've had the opportunity within the last couple of years, but Book of Mormon is finally coming close to where I am. And I'm like, oh my God, I have to go. Tickets are like $98 a seat.
Yeah.
I'm like,
yeah, no.
Okay. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah.
So back to the 1930s.
Yes, I'm really good at derailing things. I am awesome at derailing.
See, I have my fishing rod right here, and I can just right back. But anyway, in the 1930s, theater had that air of snootiness. It was just like only the hoity-toities can go. But in the midst of the Great Depression, President Franklin Roosevelt put into practice the New Deal, a number of federally funded programs to help put people back to work. Part of the Works Progress Administration, from now on known as the WPA, the Federal Theater Project, from now on known as the FTP, ran from 1935 to 1939 and annually employed an estimated 10,000 to 15,000 actors, stagehands, playwrights, costumers, directors, dancers, etc. It also allowed the public to see performances for free or at least small fees, so that not just those who could afford theater could be allowed some distraction in darker times.
That's awesome.
I think that's amazing.
I should have totally waited to say that until I let you finish your whole thought.
It's so
my
great.
Thing would have made much more sense.
But we can see a time where it was actually a priority.
Yeah.
From what I understand, the Federal Theater Project took up like 0.5% of the budget of the Works Progress Administration. But thousands of people got to go see stuff.
Yeah.
They were eligible finally to go see something. So several FTP theaters were established in larger cities all over the country, so people didn't just have to travel to New York to see theater. And from its very inception, the intent was to make sure that plays presented by the Federal Theater Project were not encumbered by censorship, as they would address issues of the day. The plan was to have a, quote, free, adult, uncensored theater.
Wow.
You're smiling, a little grin on your face. And obviously, this caused a lot of controversy, which plagued the FTP throughout its entire lifespan, because censorship is such a tricky topic in this country. What should we allow people to see and talk about? A big part of the reason the FTP shut down was because critics were very concerned with not only how much time people of color were getting on the stages, but also just how close a lot of the plays came to promoting socialism.
This whole slippery slope thing that people always use as an excuse. There's a difference, and I think we go through it now. There's a big difference between censorship and sensitivity. And the second you start talking about either, you're like, oh well, now it's socialism. Socialism is a scare tactic terminology,
right?
used to shut everybody down.
Yeah,
and just my opinion.
Well, the funny thing to me about that is, here you're in the midst of the Great Depression. People are like, selling their children so they can have some bread for the rest of the kids.
Yeah,
and nobody said, this capitalism thing didn't really work out for us. Let's give it a shot.
Yeah,
let's at least enter it into the conversation.
Yeah, well, and it's let's enter it. Or what happened is certain groups started to benefit from social programs, which
Oh,
is
no.
technically that. But we don't call it that.
No.
So we benefit from the roads infrastructures, and we benefit from farm subsidies, and certain groups benefit a lot from certain programs that give money for just, doing your thing.
Yeah.
But we don't call it that. Because when you try to give money to somebody else that you don't like what their opinion is, now we can call that socialism.
Oh, that's socialism.
Now we can't have that. Now that's socialism. That's bad. But my social program that benefits me, that's great.
Yeah, it's problematic. I mean, there's that other thing there where you had people having issue with people of color getting on stage in the Federal Theater Project shows. One picture I saw, I want to say, I think it was directed by Orson Welles, was a production of King Lear, and it was a fully African-American cast set in Haiti.
Oh, wow.
And you're like, oh my God, that would be so cool. But, then you have people standing outside with placards saying, not my Lear. And you, God.
Well, I mean, even now, I had a friend. She did a touring production of Little Mermaid.
Yep.
And she is of Asian descent.
Yep.
They're freaking out about that. I think I heard somewhere that people were freaking out that that they had someone saw a Santa in a wheelchair. Like,
oh God! Ah!
What is wrong with people? What is wrong with people that you can't even acknowledge this idea? But what kills me is, I can't talk about Santa because Santa is actually I don't talk about that. But let's talk about mermaids. And we'll say mermaids are imaginary friggin' characters, and you're getting all up in everybody's face about who is actually what a correct mermaid is. It's a friggin' imaginary character.
Yep.
I could say other things about what I believe are imaginary characters, and but I won't do that on this podcast because I would really like you to continue your work online.
Well, yeah, exactly. All I can say is I'm glad we now have a black Spider-Man. That's all.
Yay! Yeah. Thank God for that.
And he's so cool. Anyway.
Oh yes, right. Yes.
Well, back to this whole non-commercial versus commercial theater. Here we go again. Now, at the same time that many non-commercial theaters were gaining steam, colleges and universities across the country began creating academic programs for theater, which mainly conducted themselves as non-commercial theaters would. This allowed for students to have a much broader perspective of what their careers could offer. So it wasn't that they were just doing really popular musicals. They were doing, Clifford Odets plays that challenged workers' rights and everything like that. So it was really kind of cool. So it's not really a surprise then that the heads or chairs of university theater departments were selected to run FTP theaters in their cities. This happened in Seattle, when the University of Washington theater director Glenn Hughes was picked to run the FTP in Seattle. Okay, so on the table, we've got political plays inspired by pandemics. We have a federally funded theater initiative that plans to show free adult uncensored theater. And we have one of these theaters opening up in Seattle. Robert, you ready for the downhill slide of this roller coaster?
I'm putting my arms up now. I'm ready. I'm ready for the crest of the hill. So there you go.
Well, you Mennonites, I hope you can see where this is going. But if not, stick around. The end result is pretty spectacular. But before we continue, please feel free to reach out and tell me if you have a favorite piece of political theater. I'd just love to hear from you. You can use the Contact Us forum at tridenttheater.com. You can also reach me through private message in the Instagram pages for either Trident Theater or Euripides Eumenides. And while you're there, don't forget to give us a follow. However, let's get back to Robert Bogue and the conclusion of the Seattle Federal Theater Project and Spirochete. So one of the more popular types of plays performed in FTP theaters was known as the living newspaper. Have you heard of these?
Vaguely, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They were invented in America by FDP National Director Hallie Flanagan. And while I could dilute this, I think this longer description from an article I found is the best description I can offer of what a living newspaper is. These plays focused on issues of national, social, political, and economic importance, the kind of topics that would feature in the headlines of newspapers. Flanagan created a living newspaper staff along the lines of an actual printed daily paper with an editor-in-chief, managing editors, reporters, copy readers, etc., and paired this staff of reporters and journalists with dramatists. Together, the living newspaper staff would investigate such issues as how and why New York slums developed, or the state of utilities, both public and private, in Tennessee, and would gradually distill a, air quotes, dramatic piece from the facts. Interesting, right?
That's kind of, yeah.
So it's like, what I thought of was like in the old days when you go to the movies, like you'd see 18 reels of different things. You know, you'd see cartoons, you'd see serials, but then you'd see the newsreel. Where they piece together just a few things, and you know, it's like 10 minutes, and here's what the president is doing, and here's how the boys in the war are doing, and here's what Miss America is doing, something like that, right? And so that's how you got your news. But this is a thing where it's like we're taking one topic and we're focusing just on that, and we're telling you the news of that's going on in the country right now.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Now, two of the more popular living newspapers, as indicated in this description I just read, were Power, that was the title, and it was based on the Tennessee Valley Authority. Remember when that all flooded? And if it was as effective as it sounded, or if people were being left out, particularly those with less income. So, interesting social topic. Let's talk about it. Let's at least address it. The other one is called 1/3 of a Nation, and it was about poverty. 1/3 of a Nation took its title from FDR's second inauguration speech in 1937, in which he said that 1/3 of the nation was still, quote, ill-housed, ill-clad, and ill-nourished. So another one where we're like, hey, it's kind of an uncomfortable topic, but we do have to address it because there's a lot of people in poverty right now, despite everything we've done through the New Deal in the 30s.
Yeah.
But there was one more play that made some waves amongst critics and in legislative chambers. In 1936, Surgeon General Thomas Perrin announced his War on Syphilis, and used as many government avenues as he could to help increase awareness and try to get people to visit their doctors about the disease rather than letting it spread. There were a few problems with this, however. At the time, a regular doctor visit would be about $3, which would be about $67 today. Okay, now that sounds pretty standard to me to go for a regular visit if I didn't, even if I did or didn't have insurance. That's like, check my tonsils, my vitals, how's my blood pressure, etc.
Yeah.
A doctor's visit to treat syphilis at the time would then jump to an average of $25, which would be about $553 today. And that's just per visit. So if you had to go back multiple times to get treatments,
and it's
Yeah. And remember, we're living in the Great Depression.
Yeah.
Now, someone could visit a public health clinic, but apparently that basically outed a person publicly for having the illness.
No hiding that. Yeah.
I don't know how they would do that. It seems fairly discreet whenever you go to a clinic anyway, but they're like, oh, you're here for syphilis?
That's going to be a great sound bite on your
Peter Rotterdam has syphilis. Now seeing Peter Rotterdam.
The syphilis holder. Is that you, sir?
Bring your infected genitals this way. Oh, now,
wow.
Some people saw the actions of the Surgeon General as something of an attack on decency, since, we're not supposed to talk about STIs. Others just saw it as an opportunity to decry government overreach into private medical practice, which it wasn't. They're just trying to get people to test more. Like you could go into a doctor and go, I'm kind of itchy down there. And then, oh, yes, well, you have the Sith. It could just be a talk. But this didn't deter the federal government. In 1938, a living newspaper called Spirochete was performed at the FTP in Chicago. The word spirochete, spelled Spirochete, means a specific type of spiral-shaped bacteria that are dangerous pathogens to humans, which can cause such maladies as Lyme disease and syphilis.
Mm-hmm.
Spirochete basically was a presentation of the history of the spread of syphilis throughout Europe and America, including the discovery of the bacterium that caused the illness and the development of the first effective treatment, salvarsan. Now, by the time the play that was first performed, salvarsan had already been in existence for 30 years. It was invented in 1908. The play went up in 1938, but its use was not nearly as prolific as the spread of the illness. However, no one knew just how prolific it was because no one was really willing to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
So here's a quote that I got from an article. A culture of shame and silence surrounded the disease and prevented the spread of accurate information. Many still assumed that the disease was a punishment for sin or that it was only contracted by the lower classes, air quotes, perverts, or African Americans.
Wow.
And from what I understand, the records did indicate that African Americans were more affected by the disease. But I would suggest that since hardly any white people were being tested by choice, I have a feeling the numbers were skewed in an unfortunate way.
Yeah.
Another quote I found about the shame around the illness. The word syphilis did not even appear in print media until 1937.
Wow.
Don't even print the word.
Yeah.
Then people will ask about it. How do you spell that? What does it mean? So in any case, Spirochete was massively successful in Chicago. And that's not really too much of a surprise because their state legislature had just passed a law about mandatory premarital syphilis testing. So before you got married, you had to test. But many thought that didn't go far enough. They wanted prenatal testing as well. So if you're pregnant or if you want to get pregnant,
you got to test.
It's funny, there's a treatment sitting on the shelves for 30 years and they're like, no, test because we got to see who's got it. Spirochete was then moved to several other cities with FTP theaters, one of which was Seattle.
Hey, look at that.
Yeah. In Seattle, syphilis had killed at least 50 people per year through the 1930s. But by the time Spirochete was performed in Seattle in 1939, reporting had improved, but not by too much. 847 cases were reported in 1931, and 1,232 were reported in 1939. So I guess gradual growth. But between those years, the population of Seattle was between 365,000 and 368,000. So, you know, there's only 847 people who have it out of 365,000. We're probably okay.
We're probably okay, yeah. Well, plus, it's a port city, so it's those sailors. Again, it's just the sailors. So just stay away from those sailors.
And of course, most people in Seattle simply assume the disease not only spread amongst the lower class prostitutes and, of course, African Americans.
Yeah.
However, in the fall of 1938, 2 bills about mandatory testing started circulating throughout the Washington State Senate with no official actions being made on them by the time that Spirochete premiered in February 1939. So the discussion was happening. And here comes this play about it. The Seattle FTP reached out to the Ladies Auxiliary of the King County Medical Society to be a major sponsor of the production. The society did sign on, but also wanted to make sure that their involvement wouldn't deter people too much on the subject of mandatory testing. You know, they didn't want to feel like they were coming down too hard on anybody, like, get yourself tested. No,
Exactly, yeah.
Just subtle suggestion. It's for the betterment of all, right? And all involved wanted to make sure that the play was not the equivalent of a dull PowerPoint presentation where the presenter just reads the slides to the audience. You know, wanted to make sure it was at least fun. So the play was rewritten in a few ways. In the original play, an early scene depicted legislators debating the points of the mandatory testing legislation. In the Seattle production, they rewrote it so that the characters who opposed mandatory testing would be subtly less likable to the audience. I couldn't tell.
Subtle.
All I could imagine was a guy standing up in the stand is like, and I don't like mandatory testing. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to kick my boy. You know, I brought him along so you could all watch.
Yes, I was, excuse me, I was late because I was eating a cat. So no
I
testing.
Vote no.
Bring me another cat to eat. I'm going to work hard this Sunday and not go to church while I'm eating a cat. So
subtle.
Yes. Subtle. Yes.
Oh, man. So they also made sure to make it relevant to Seattle so that names and places were changed to remind the audience that this was actually still happening in real time outside the theater. So, you know, if they mentioned a street, they would now change it to a street name in Seattle or something like that. Or if they mentioned a sports team, they would say the sports team is in Seattle or something like that. Mm-hmm. And to that point, the ending was rewritten. In the original one in Chicago, they celebrated the passing of the legislation, and now mandatory testing is happening. Now, since the two bills had not yet passed in the Senate, the ending was rewritten to depict the legislators casting their votes, and then the curtain closed before a resolution could be determined.
Oh, wow.
Right? So, like, I guess we'll see. And again, this was meant to remind audience members that there was still time to affect action in the real world. Yeah. The questions brought up in the theater, and it's up to the audience to find the solution in the real world.
Choose the early choose your own adventure.
I love it.
Yeah, I like that.
The week before the production opened, the Ladies Auxiliary reserved 150 tickets at a special rate of 85 cents to be used throughout the run. The FDP distributed 35,000 handbills throughout the city, mostly to doctors' offices, hospitals, and public health clinics, and they hung 3,500 posters throughout the city. Opening night, 150 doctors were in the audience, and throughout the run, WPA employees could see the play at a special rate of 10 cents per seat. So over the run, WPA employees comprised 1/3 of the total audience. Wow. Make it accessible. You'll get people in the house.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And they were federally funded. So it wasn't like they had to make or break.
Yeah.
The results. Here's a quote. Spirochete was the biggest hit the Seattle Federal Theater Project ever had. Almost 3,000 people attended the productions, nearly 1,000 more than attended any other Seattle Federal Theater production at the Metropolitan Theater. And the show grossed just over $1,000, which was $400 more than the Seattle FTP made on any other production.
Nice.
Right?
Nice.
And incidentally, the Metropolitan Theater stood at 415 University Way from 1911 to 1954 when it was demolished. It is now known as 415 University Street downtown, and the Olympic Hotel is there today.
Oh, okay. I know where that is.
Mm-hmm.
I know where that is.
However, the Ladies Auxiliary was not entirely impressed with the production, claiming that the play was still a little too informational and not dramatic enough. How do you dramatize the history of civil liberties?
I mean, I have ideas. Would you like an interpretive dance? See, you over there, you, Tourgette, you're the syphilis. Tourgette, spin.
Oh yeah, and the ribbon in the spiral shape. Yes. It's the spirochete.
And much like in Phantom, your genitals will fall off like the chandelier at the party. That's at the end. That's in the Act 1. Boom, right on the stage. There you go.
Splop. Yes. And I hesitate to say maybe a sex scene about syphilis is probably not appropriate. So
and a musical number.
You've got the syphilis. Oh, but speaking of music, apparently there was music in the production.
Okay.
The Ladies Auxiliary also described the music played as ear-splitting, but in their regular publication, The Bulletin, they at least acknowledged that other audience members seemed to enjoy the production more than they did.
Those ladies are they just don't get they don't get syphilis. Okay, they just don't get syphilis.
There's just something I can't quite put my finger on here.
Wow.
This must be for the kids. The kids get it.
The kids get it. Those young youth, those youth. In my day. No.
The Seattle Post-Intelligencer claimed that the mandatory testing seemed a bit presumptuous, but they did print the word syphilis, and they did print the names of prominent members of society who were in attendance.
Wow, that's a big deal. That's huge. That's huge.
Mm-hmm. The next month, March 1939, both bills passed in the Senate, requiring mandatory premarital and prenatal testing, and they were scheduled to go into effect in January 1940.
Wow.
Affected real change. I'm not going to say it did. I'm not going to say it's directly responsible, but come on, a month later.
It's coincidental.
I know.
Yeah.
The success of Spirochete encouraged the Seattle Federal Theater Project so much that they began developing another living newspaper about the local logging industry called Timber. But the National Federal Theater Project dissolved in 1940 before the production could come to fruition. Today, syphilis can be cured with penicillin, but new strains have emerged which may not be cured that way.
Yeah.
And that is my story for today on Spirochete.
Wow. That was okay. I dig, I come into this and I'm like, oh, well, I like this. I have this play. I have this idea that's a political thing. You give me a whole lesson and I don't have to pay back any student loans. After this lesson. So
I'll take donations. Feel free to send donations. I mean, this is valuable shit here, Robert.
No, this is cool. Especially reinforcing why Seattle is awesome.
Yeah. Well, I started to research it because I just heard about the Chicago play, and I started looking it up, and then I saw this thing is like it's the biggest show that the Seattle Federal Theater Project ever had. I'm like, this play about syphilis. You're telling me this play about syphilis was the biggest show they ever had? Okay, I'm in. Let's go.
Yeah. No, and you're right. It does trying to affect change through these new ideas. I mean, it's what theater. I mean, art. Visual art and everything has done the same type of thing through years. And sometimes it's subtle, and sometimes it's very overt and very very right in your face. Mm-hmm. And it just depends on what the message is, and it depends on what's needed. Sometimes it needs to be kind of in your face.
Yeah. And, there's a couple points to that I would like to bring up. I'll say the negative one first. I think it's so interesting how this country consistently tells people that arts don't really matter. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like, we could do without them, but it's nice to have them, I guess. You have plays that affect people on a grand scale, a massive scale, and they mean so much to so many people. The thing is, I'll bring up Hamilton because now you've got people who think that they are 100% scholars about, the inception of America. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, hey, it's a catchy show with some catchy tunes and everything, and it's flawed in a lot of ways historically.
Yes.
But you're paying attention, and I absolve a lot of the things because by the end of the play, the last line of the play is who lives, who dies, who tells your story. So it's like, that's up to you then to understand the perspective of the story you're being told.
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of Hamilton, we go, wow, I had no idea he was such a great guy. You also have to remember that he got into a ton of duels. He's basically on the $10 bill because he forced market capitalism on America. Mm-hmm. Carnegie basically what made sure his face was on currency. Yeah. And when he originally proposed what we should go to next, he wanted a lifetime president. I'm sorry, that's a monarch.
Yeah.
It's like we just fought this war to get rid of that monarch to get our own. Yeah. So we're like, the message is skewed a bit.
Yeah.
We don't talk about those things in the play.
Yeah. No, well, and that goes back to so much about your point of view. And you've got to consider not just your point of view, but you really got to consider the point of view of the source material. Again, just going back to Shakespeare, realizing that like histories and things like that were written to make a certain group look good. It was there's a lot to it. There's a lot of rich characters, a lot about theater and everything that you take from that. But you always have to consider who is telling the story.
Yes.
But the biggest thing, like you'd said earlier in the discussion, is that it brings about ideas. It makes you think. And I don't know how many times I also work with visual artists in my job, and a lot of times working with those artists as we're putting up artwork, or there's a new piece available for an audience. So many viewers will say, I don't understand that. I mean, I don't necessarily like that. Why is that art? And honestly, the reason is because it gets you to ask, what about it do I not like? What about it does not appeal to me? And then it makes you think, what do I like?
Yes.
What is it about other art? What is it about other theater, about other music that does appeal to me? What does touch me? What messages do I take from this? And what can I learn from any sort of theater, any sort of visual art, anything like that? So the discussion is the thing. Right. I guess the whole the play's the thing to catch the conscience of the king. And I know that's Hamlet. It's not Richard. I know that. But it is that thing. It's what do we take away?
Right.
We don't like it, do like it, but we think about it, and that's the most important thing.
So here's the stat, though, on the flip side of that coin that I will end today with.
Okay.
I was just talking about this with somebody the other day. I'm still staggered by the fact that fewer people voted in the 2004 presidential election than voted for American Idol that year.
Oh, yeah. It's staggering and depressing. Yeah, it's staggering and depressing.
Now, the number of votes, like a person could call in and vote multiple times on American American Idol.
That was subtle.
I know. I'm eating a cat. But, you can only cast, apparently, one vote for a presidential election. So, the numbers are obviously a little bit skewed in that way, but I'm like, but what are people paying attention to more?
Mm-hmm.
They're paying attention to the stuff that affects their soul.
Exactly. They're paying attention to that, and they're being driven by the theatricality. Ironically, we don't necessarily need theater. Some people will say, I disagree. Yet they are so driven by the theatricality when it's presented to them as truth. Mm-hmm. Oh, this is the truth, not the truth that you see with your eyes, where you see it's theatrical. I can just remember when people lost their damn minds when Obama wore a tan suit. Oh yeah.
Speaking of theatricality.
Yeah, what the hell? This country just started right downhill. That's what's led to
That's
what's led to all of that damn brown suit, that tan
Don't
suit.
You appear in seersucker in front of me.
Yeah. It's So every single thing you were talking about syphilis and all of this, I'm like, you could just change that to COVID, and
I know.
Change the words to COVID, and all of the blank bullshit. Sorry. Oh no! I said the word. I said a word. I hope you can edit. Nope. Okay. Like I hope you don't edit me. Because that's
I won't. It's wrong.
Yes. Yeah. Anyway, I think it's sad that in certain areas we've really recognized where the problems are, but then based on certain people in power in politics coming around full circle, we haven't made any progress. We're still right where we're talking just about it's a different version of the same thing, which is really sad.
Well, the weird thing about it is I haven't seen a lot of COVID plays yet.
No.
I mean, I've seen a couple, but they existed before COVID. The Humans by Stephen Karam, with all of these people kind of locked in a basement together. Mm-hmm. That one, and the same time I saw that and I saw people were doing new productions of it, I went, oh, they're really talking about the effect of what the pandemic and the lockdowns had on us. That's kind of interesting to use that piece of theater in that way.
Mm-hmm.
Same time, I see a friend of mine on an Instagram story post just a single headline, and it says, the lockdowns in the pandemic were ineffective. And then their little caption, oh, who would have guessed? I'm like,
yeah.
Just go ahead and get out there, 4 years ago and tell me that you felt comfortable in supermarkets. Okay.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt.
And I don't know. I think people can politicize anything, but at least there are brave playwrights out there who will stand up and write some things and actually get the conversation going.
Yep. And I know, and it definitely this obviously is focusing on playwrights, but just artists in general.
Yeah.
Thank God we have art. Thank God we have art that's willing to stand up and either subtly guide the conversation or grab you by the shoulders and say, do you understand what's happening?
I love it.
Do you understand? Take a look at this. So thank God for artists.
Perfect. Well, did you guess right? Did you think this was going to culminate in a federally funded, successful production of a play aimed at getting people to have themselves tested for syphilis? I was surprised too, but from what I understand, this is one of the closest examples of an attempt at a national American theater that we've ever had. At the end of the tale, I'm just glad to say that the Roosevelts were such fans of theater. I want to thank Robert Bogue for his contribution to this episode, and I want to thank you for being, like the Roosevelts, fans of theater. And if you're interested in the Federal Theater Project, then make sure you're subscribed. I have some more content about the FDP coming down the pike. But for now, I'll sign off. This is Aaron Odom from Trident Theater, ending another episode of Euripides Eumenides. I'll get another episode in your ears in 2 weeks, and I'll see you at intermission.